What is up, everybody? It's Shane with Ripped Inflatables, and I'm coming to you with a longer stream of consciousness video. Sorry about my finger there. Some of y'all on Facebook have seen this. This is the Dib that was born in 1995 that I just retrofitted a self-bailing floor into. And that's what this video is about. Because I've received this question a lot. And I wasn't the first one to receive this question. There were lots of bucket boats built. And people think that it's maybe easier than what it actually is. So let's go over the geometry of what's needed to turn a bucket boat into a self-bailer. The geometry that makes it possible is the spacing between the bottom of the thwart and the bottom of the floor. A lot of bucket boats were built with full depth thwarts, so they go from the top of the top of the side tube all the way to just above the floor, and that's to keep the floor from pushing up so much while you're paddling. So what made this boat possible is I didn't have to touch the thwarts. The thwarts were built and they were installed at a depth of about 2 7/8 inch, roughly 3 inches from the floor. And they did that for a reason. It's because they wanted to build a boat and not have to build different components and to be able to offer a self-bailer, as far as I can tell. And that's the depth of the floor material that they used, and I just happened to have a section of it that I could build a floor with. That is the key factor in can I self-bail this thing. You have to build the floor if you're going to do it, or you have to have a floor that fits the boat. And that's what that is there. That's the old floor, and if you notice down there, underneath it is going to be the new floor. So that's the exact same floor out of the exact same boat. And I can put that in. Or you have to build it. And in this case, I could build it with the drop stitch that this boat was built with if you were to order a fully self-bailing Dib back in 1995. The other thing that really affects whether you should self-bail a boat is how long you expect to be able to get out of the labor that it takes to do this. If you bring a 25-year-old high side that has everything falling off of it and the seam tapes are peeling, that may not be the right boat for this. Dibs have a history of being solid boats it's just how they are built. These are built more like a tire that you would get for your car, where they glue everything together and then they vulcanize it. They use uncured product, and then they build and then they vulcanize and it becomes a cured product. Most of the other manufacturers, they don't vulcanize themselves. They buy vulcanized material and they use glue that vulcanizes with the catalyst. That's what I use. But with how Dib builds, these things hardly ever come apart. The material is grade A, top notch. They were a military contractor, and almost everything they built is built out of grade A military spec rubber. Even the valves, those are military spec metal military valves. Why they call them military valves, I don't know. So anyways, this boat I can easily see lasting another 20 years. Why do I say that? It's because the only Dib I've destroyed was born in 1974. And I destroyed it last year. So it lived about 50 years. And I don't see why this one couldn't. Overall, it was in really good shape. There was a patch that had some nasty overglue on it, and I took care of the nasty overglue, so it's harder to see that patch, but that was really the only patch in the tubes. And the floor was all torn up. And that's why he brought it in. He wanted patches on the floor, and I talked him into self-bailing it. But I wasn't the first one to put all these patches down. I put a bunch of them down. But like this patch, and this patch, this patch, you know, maybe a dozen or so I didn't do this time. Maybe I did some in the past on it, but the floor was getting torn up because of how soft and soggy it was. And that's one thing I didn't have to do. I didn't have to take the floor off of this boat and put a new one on. If you notice, that is the factory gum. That is the factory sheet of material. And using a bit of witchcraft, I was able to glue the floor, glue the inflatable floor, insert it, and bond it together. And then I touched it up on top. But self-bailing a boat is no joke. If you go and you buy a self-bailing boat, I just went and looked up the other day what they're selling for. And one of the big NRSs on the Ocoee is like $7,500. So, this is a bargain for getting a self-bailing boat in today's world. But you have to have the boat that's worth it. Now, if you had another boat that had thwarts that are too big, you know, you can't really cut down the thwarts. That doesn't work that way. You might be able to find the right size thwarts, but again, you're talking about the distance and the width. And those greatly affect how it fits in the boat. I don't know. People wanted me to do all the things. This is the first one I've done myself. I did take a self-bailed boat by somebody else and I made it better, but it still didn't look right. When the thwarts were the right size to allow a floor to slip in, but the floor wasn't flat with the bottom of the tubes. It was depressed, so it actually created a little wobble to it. But it still fit better and held in better than how it was done beforehand. But can boats be self-bailed? Yes, they can. Does every boat need to be self-bailed? No, it doesn't. And maybe, you know, just understanding the simple thwart geometry is the biggest thing. You know, finding a floor that fits might be easier because it just needs to be smaller. But it needs to be the right size smaller. It can't be just barely smaller because you have to, you know, clear the chafing so the floor doesn't rub on the tubes, because that'll lead to a problem in the future. But it really wasn't a self-bailer until I made it be able to drain. And this was the last step of the process. And it was probably the hardest step of the process. And that's the problem with going and doing repair work, is a lot of times you don't get to do your repair in the order that the boat would normally be built in. And this is a clear example right here. So these floors, when they were built, these hinge tapes were installed on the floor. The holes were punched, and then the tapes were formed. And then from there, you're just applying the floor to the boat. But when you punch these holes with the floor attached to the boat, you have to be very careful. You can, if the boat bunches up in between the floor, you know, the ground floor, and the hole that you're trying to punch, you'll punch a hole in the boat. Don't ask me how I know that. And just to be able to manipulate the boat around to punch all the holes that I punched was fairly difficult. Some of them were easier than others. But this is my last chance to take a video. It's been sitting in here for a number of weeks now. and the customer is going to be here in about an hour to pick it up. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this may answer some people's questions. It's not a common question anymore. Almost everything's built with self-bailing floors these days, and the advent of the PVC rafts and their price point has definitely decreased the pressure to make bucket boats into bailers. But it still exists. People still want it. I'm happy to help. If we got good spacing there, I'll build you a floor. I'm not afraid. I've done it a few times now. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good day.